think you're being kind, that by keeping the peace, avoiding conflict, suppressing your anger, and constantly being agreeable, you're showing maturity, maybe even spiritual growth. You say yes when you mean no. You smile when you feel disrespected. You nod along with opinions that disgust you, because you think silence is noble. But what if I told you? That's not kindness. That's self-betrayal. And Carl Jung would call it by its true name, cowardice, psychological dysfunction. A persona so inflated it has completely eclipsed who you really are. Let's stop right here. Because if you're someone who has lived your life trying to be the good person, the helpful one, the dependable one, always available, never upsetting anyone, never taking up too much space, then this isn't just a video for you, this is a wake-up call. Jung didn't admire people who were simply nice. In fact, he warned us about them. He believed that compulsive niceness is one of the most dangerous psychological traps we can fall into. Not because it's evil, but because it's false. When you constantly present a version of yourself that is palatable, soft, agreeable, and easy to digest, you're not being virtuous. You're being fake. And the longer you wear that mask, the more disconnected you become from your true self. That mask? Jung called it the persona. A social performance, a costume we wear to survive the expectations of the world. But the problem arises when you start believing that the mask is who you really are. And let's be honest, you probably do. You think your ability to tolerate disrespect without reacting is strength. You think hiding your anger makes you evolved. You think abandoning your own needs for the sake of others makes you generous. But what if it's all just fear? Fear of rejection. Fear of being disliked. Fear of being seen as selfish, rude, or too much. What if your niceness is nothing but a defense mechanism? A manipulative strategy you developed as a child to survive in a world that punished authenticity? Because here's the brutal truth. Every time you suppress your rage to avoid confrontation, every time you fake agreement to keep the peace, every time you perform kindness while secretly boiling with resentment, you are feeding your shadow. You are stuffing your real, raw emotions into the basement of your psyche, and they don't disappear. They wait, they grow stronger, and eventually they erupt through explosive anger, toxic relationships, psychosomatic illness, depression, or burnout. Jung once said, "The persona is a system of behavior which is partially dictated by society and partially by the individual's own expectations. But when it becomes your entire identity, you lose touch with the self. You become a ghost in your own life, haunting rooms with fake smiles and dead eyes, wondering why you feel so empty even though everyone says you're such a good person." So let me ask you this. Are you really kind? Or are you just scared? Because real kindness isn't about never saying no. It isn't about being universally liked. It isn't about self-erasure for the comfort of others. Real kindness has teeth. Real kindness can say, stop, can walk away, can disappoint, can confront, can say, enough. Carl Jung didn't want you to be pleasant. He wanted you to be real. And that's what we're going to explore in this video. Not how to be liked, but how to be whole. Not how to be nice, but how to be free. This might be the most uncomfortable and the most important truth you've heard in a long time. If you've ever wondered why you feel exhausted after social interactions, why you feel hollow even when everyone praises you, or why your life feels strangely disconnected from who you actually are, Jung would point to one central problem. Your persona has taken over your soul. The persona, in Jungian psychology, is not evil. It's necessary. It's the social mask you develop so you can function in the world. Without it, society would be chaos. But Jung issued a very clear warning. The moment you identify with your persona, the moment you believe that mask is your true self, you begin a slow psychological suicide. The nice person is the clearest example of this danger. Your persona is built around one obsessive goal: approval. You learned early on that being agreeable kept you safe. Maybe conflict in your family was punished. Maybe expressing anger made you feel abandoned. Maybe being good was the only way you received love. So you adapted. You became polite, understanding, flexible. You became the person who never causes trouble. And over time, this wasn't just something you did. It became who you thought you were. But Jung would say this: what you call kindness is often nothing more than an inflated persona, a performance exaggerated beyond its healthy function. You don't act nice because you freely choose to. You act nice because you're terrified of what would happen if you didn't. Terrified of disapproval. Terrified of rejection. Terrified of being seen as selfish, aggressive, or bad. And here's the psychological cost of that fear. When you live entirely through a persona, your authentic self doesn't disappear. It gets buried. You stop asking yourself what you actually feel, what you actually want, what you actually believe. You adapt so automatically to the expectations of others that you lose all internal reference points. Jung described this as a state where the ego becomes fused with the persona, and the individual no longer knows who they are behind the mask. That's why so many nice people feel empty. Why praise feels strangely meaningless. Why approval never truly satisfies. Because deep down, it's not you who's being approved, it's the performance. And the more you invest in that performance, the more fragile your identity becomes. Any criticism feels like an existential threat. Any disapproval feels like annihilation. You can't tolerate being disliked, even by people you don't respect, because your entire sense of self is propped up by external validation. Jung warned that this kind of persona identification leads to neurosis, not because you're weak, but because you're divided. One part of you is acting saintly, calm, endlessly patient. Another part is furious, exhausted, resentful, and starving for honesty. And the longer this split persists, the more violent the inner tension becomes. This is where people start saying things like, "I don't know who I am anymore," or "I feel like I'm living someone else's life," or "I'm doing everything right but I feel dead inside." That's not depression without a cause. That's the consequence of living behind a mask for too long. But here's the most dangerous part. The part most people never see coming. Everything you refuse to live consciously does not disappear. It doesn't dissolve. It sinks. It goes underground. And it begins to take on a life of its own. And that brings us directly to Jung's most unsettling concept, the shadow, and why nice people often carry the darkest, most dangerous shadows of all. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. There's a dangerous misconception that nice people are harmless, that because they're polite, soft-spoken, agreeable, and avoid confrontation, they pose no threat, to others or to themselves. But Jung would tell you, the people most obsessed with being good are often the ones harboring the most repressed darkness. And the more you suppress what's real in you, the more power it gains underground, in what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is everything you reject, deny, and disown about yourself. It's your anger, your rage, your selfishness, your sexual energy, your envy, your pride, your need to dominate, your capacity to say no. Not because these are inherently evil, but because you believed they were. You were taught that these parts of you were bad, so you buried them. You tried to amputate them from your personality. But as Jung warns us again and again, what you resist not only persists, it grows. And the nice person is the perfect host for a monstrous shadow. Every time you feel violated but choose to smile. Every time you feel rage but say, "It's okay." Every time you betray your own boundaries just to maintain harmony, you're feeding the beast inside you. You're teaching your unconscious that your truth is unacceptable. You're pushing vital emotional energy into exile, but the unconscious does not forget. It does not let go. It stores everything you suppress, and it waits. Jung made it brutally clear. The shadow does not disappear simply because you ignore it. In fact, the more unconscious it is, the more it controls you from behind the scenes. That's why nice people sometimes explode in ways that seem completely out of character. That's why someone who is always calm and helpful suddenly lashes out in rage, cheats, collapses in burnout, or sinks into unexplained depression. It's not out of nowhere. It's the shadow breaking through. And here's the irony. By trying to be good all the time, you become dangerous in the worst possible way, because your darkness is not conscious, not integrated, not mastered. It's leaking out in ways you don't understand. Passive aggression, sabotage, sudden emotional eruptions, toxic guilt, chronic resentment. And each time you repress instead of express, your sense of powerlessness deepens. But this isn't just about outbursts. It's about vitality, authenticity, wholeness. Jung didn't want you to fix the shadow by being more moral. He wanted you to face it, to bring it to light, to stop pretending that you're only gentle, only kind, only selfless. Because when you own your darkness consciously, it stops owning you from the shadows. You become whole, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. You don't have to act out the shadow to integrate it. You have to recognize it, dialogue with it, accept that you are both light and dark, that you are capable of anger, and that this is not a flaw, but a human truth, that your need for power, for space, for disagreement, for limits, are not signs of failure, but signals of life. And this is where things get even more uncomfortable, because the shadow doesn't just live inside you. It lives inside your relationships. Your constant need to be nice isn't just about self-protection, it's about control. And that's where we must go next, into the manipulative contract hidden beneath compulsive kindness. Let's get brutally honest. Your niceness isn't as innocent as you think. You may not lie, cheat, or scream, but you do manipulate. And the most dangerous part, you don't even know you're doing it. Jung would call this unconscious manipulation, a subtle, socially acceptable form of control disguised as virtue. You act agreeable. You bend over backwards to help. You silence your needs. You sacrifice. And all the while, there's a hidden contract playing out beneath the surface. If I am good enough, nice enough, selfless enough, you will love me. You won't reject me. You'll validate me. You'll never leave. But here's the truth. That's not love. That's a transaction. You're not being kind because you genuinely want to. You're being kind because you need something in return: safety, approval, validation, belonging. And when the other person fails to fulfill their end of the unspoken deal, what happens? You feel betrayed, angry, hurt, resentful. After everything I did for you, you scream, maybe out loud, maybe just inside your mind. That rage, that bitterness, it's not about them. It's about you. Because you were never truly giving. You were investing, hoping to earn love by performing self-erasure. And when the emotional payoff doesn't come, you feel robbed. This is the ugly underside of niceness. It's not generosity, it's control. You think you're being compassionate, but what you're really doing is seducing people into liking you. You think you're building connection, but what you're really doing is bartering for affection. And Jung would say, this is the shadow wearing a halo. Here's what's even more sinister. By never expressing your real thoughts, your true boundaries, your raw emotions, you're not just manipulating others. You're also manipulating yourself. You're convincing yourself that you're a saint, that you're better than those selfish people who speak up, get angry, take space. You build a secret identity as the morally superior one, while rotting inside with resentment. And when you live this way long enough, something breaks. The body starts speaking through tension, fatigue, illness. The psyche whispers through depression, numbness, quiet despair. And in relationships, the dynamic becomes toxic. You attract people who take and take because you taught them you don't need anything in return. Then you resent them for doing exactly what your persona invited. But it doesn't end there. Because being nice all the time doesn't just sabotage your integrity. It destroys your capacity for real connection. When everything you show is a mask, nobody ever gets to see you. Not really. And this leads us to the next painful truth. The more you perform for approval, the more intimacy slips through your fingers. Because real intimacy, the kind that heals, demands something your niceness will never allow: authenticity, vulnerability, and conflict. You think being nice makes you lovable, that by never making waves, never disagreeing, never upsetting anyone, you're creating harmony, that by always being available, always saying yes, always putting others first, you're building strong connections. But here's the paradox Jung would force you to face. The more you perform niceness, the more disconnected you become, not just from yourself, but from everyone around you. Because people can only love you to the extent that they know you. And if what you offer them is a persona, a curated, polished version of yourself designed to be inoffensive and pleasing, then no one ever actually meets you. They meet the mask, the illusion, the agreeable facade, and what you end up with isn't a relationship, it's a role play. A play where you act the selfless caretaker, the always smiling peacemaker, while your true feelings rot backstage. And here's the cruel twist. You attract exactly the kind of people who benefit from that script. People who take, but don't give. People who love your compliance, but never ask how you feel. People who expect you to always be fine, because you never show them otherwise. And over time, these relationships become hollow, lopsided, and emotionally dead, because they were built on performance, not presence. Jung understood that intimacy requires more than niceness. It requires authenticity. And authenticity isn't always pleasant. It means sometimes saying no. It means sometimes being disappointing. It means sometimes expressing anger, setting boundaries, creating discomfort. True intimacy demands that you risk rejection by being fully yourself, not just the parts that are easy to love. But niceness kills that risk. It numbs conflict, flattens emotional depth, avoids the necessary ruptures that create growth. Because here's the hard truth. Conflict is not the enemy of intimacy. Avoidance is. When you consistently repress what you really feel for the sake of keeping the peace, what you're actually doing is burying resentment. And resentment is a slow poison. It builds, it festers, it starts small, subtle tension, a few unmet needs, but eventually it transforms into silent hostility, passive aggression, or total emotional shutdown. The saddest part? You may have relationships filled with people, but still feel completely alone. Because you're never fully seen, never fully heard, never fully known. And deep down, a part of you is screaming to be found. But your own obsession with being nice is the very thing keeping you invisible. So let me ask you this. Do you want to be liked, or do you want to be known? Because the cost of constant likability is emotional starvation. You can't build real connection without real emotion. And you can't feel real emotion if you're always performing emotional perfection. Jung's solution wasn't to become cold or confrontational. It was to become real. He called this process individuation, the integration of the whole self, including the parts we hide, suppress, or shame. And that journey begins by learning to reclaim the emotions you've been taught to fear, especially your anger. Because your anger isn't the enemy. Your anger is the key. And that's where we go next. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. Anger is not your enemy. It's not a flaw in your character or a sign of spiritual failure. It's not something to suppress, deny, or manage into oblivion. According to Carl Jung, anger, like every emotion we've cast into the shadow, is a message, a signal from your unconscious that something sacred in you has been violated. But you were taught otherwise, weren't you? You were trained to believe that anger is dangerous, that to feel it, let alone express it, is to lose control, to become mean, selfish, not nice. So what did you do? You swallowed it. You smiled through clenched teeth. You said, "It's fine," while your stomach tightened and your chest ached. You turned your anger inward, turning it into guilt, shame, or fatigue. You told yourself you were rising above, but in truth, you were abandoning yourself. Jung warned us that this is one of the most destructive patterns in the psyche, the systematic repression of vital instincts in service of a false ideal. When you cut yourself off from your anger, you also cut yourself off from your truth. Because anger doesn't arise in a vacuum. It comes when a boundary is crossed, when your values are ignored, when your time, energy, or dignity is being drained without consent. Anger is your internal guardian. It says, "Something is not okay. You are not okay with this." To ignore it is to ignore yourself. And here's the paradox. The more you repress anger to appear nice, the more likely you are to express it in toxic, unconscious ways. Sudden outbursts, passive-aggressive remarks, sarcastic jabs, silent withdrawal, chronic fatigue. Jung called this phenomenon the shadow taking possession, when everything you push down gains autonomy and erupts at the worst possible moments. Not because you're broken, but because your soul is trying to be heard. The solution is not rage. It's not becoming cruel or vengeful or reckless. The solution is integration. Learning to sit with your anger, listen to it, understand it, let it speak before you silence it with guilt. Ask yourself, what boundary has been crossed? What truth have I been denying? What do I need to say that I've been afraid to say? Reclaiming anger is reclaiming power. It's reclaiming clarity. It's standing in the fire of your own truth and saying, "This matters. I matter." And when you allow that fire to exist without shame, something profound happens. You begin to act from integrity, not impulse. You stop performing kindness and you start choosing it from a place of wholeness. You can say no without apologizing. You can express hurt without guilt. You can disappoint others without betraying yourself. This is the beginning of individuation, the process Jung saw as the highest aim of human development. Not to become perfect, but to become whole. And now, the journey turns toward action, because awareness alone is not enough. If you want to become real, truly real, you must start making different choices. In the next part, we'll explore exactly how to do that. Practical, grounded steps to stop being compulsively nice and start living with authenticity, integrity, and unapologetic self-respect. You've spent years, maybe decades, shaping yourself into someone who won't be rejected, someone who's easy to be around, quick to say yes, slow to disappoint. You've confused self-erasure with kindness, compliance with maturity, and exhaustion with virtue. But Jung was clear. We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. You cannot change your life by condemning your anger, your needs, or your boundaries. You change by integrating them, by facing the truth of who you are, not who you perform to be. So now what? Now, the work begins. This isn't about tearing off the mask overnight. It's about choosing moment by moment to be real instead of safe. It's about recognizing when you're about to default to people-pleasing and pausing, even if just for a second, to ask, what do I really feel? What do I actually want right now? What would it look like to honor that truth, even if it's uncomfortable? Being real is uncomfortable. It forces you to confront how many of your relationships are built on a version of you that doesn't truly exist. It means setting boundaries that will confuse people. It means disappointing expectations that were never aligned with your soul. It means grieving the persona you built to survive. But here's what you gain: clarity, energy, inner peace, self-respect, the ability to look in the mirror and not feel like you're fading, the ability to stand in a room and know, deeply, that you're not there because you were liked into it, guilted into it, tolerated into it, but because you chose it, because you wanted it, because you were there, not the mask. Jung called this individuation, not the pursuit of perfection, but the courage to become whole, to embrace contradiction, to hold both strength and softness, compassion and confrontation, gentleness and fire, to be capable of kindness that isn't bought with silence, and love that isn't dependent on self-denial. This is not the easy path, but it is the liberating one. So if you've lived your life afraid of conflict, terrified of being disliked, addicted to the approval of others, let this be the beginning. The moment you choose to stop being nice and start being true. Now I want to hear from you. What part of you have you been hiding in order to be liked? What have you stopped expressing because you were afraid it would make you bad? Leave a comment below, not just to share, but to take the first step out of the mask. Let this be your declaration. And whatever you do, don't stop here. There's another video waiting for you, one that takes this even deeper. If this message resonated with you, the next step is just as important. So keep going, keep watching. I'll see you there.